would strip public employees of most of their collective bargaining rights. Wisconsin's new Republican governor says the measure is needed to trim the state's $3.5 billion deficit.
It's either a matter of making reductions and making modest requests of our government employees, or looking at massive layoffs at a time when we don't need anybody else laid off.
Show me what democracy looks like!
These public employees say Walker's move to limit their collective bargaining rights and force them to contribute more to their pensions and their health care goes too far. They say his intention is to break the back of the public employee unions.
All of us know that cuts need to be made. Everybody knows that everybody's got to pay more. That's not the issue. The issue is that there is language in the bill that busts our union.
Republicans, who won a majority in both houses of Wisconsin's state legislature last November, vowed to curb state employee benefits.
A lot of our budget problems are caused by the most generous public employee pensions in the country.
Walker supporters also showed up at the Capitol Saturday, but they were heavily outnumbered by the other group of protesters. It has become a bitter partisan battle. Public employee unions are strong backers of Democrats across the United States, and President Obama says they shouldn't be blamed for the state's budget woes.
Some of what I've heard coming out of Wisconsin, where you're just making it harder for public employees to collectively bargain generally, seems like more of an assault on unions.
Democrats in the state legislature's lower house have forced their Republican colleagues to postpone a vote on the governor's proposal until Tuesday. But Democratic state senators fled to neighboring Illinois so as to avoid a vote in their chamber.
The reason why we left is this was the only way we knew we could slow the process down, allow people to be heard on this particular issue and what it means to them, but most importantly, try and get the governor to sit down rationally and talk about this proposal and talk about changes.
But the governor refuses to budge, and the standoff continues. It's a battle that could be repeated in other states as they struggle to fund basic services at a time of dwindling revenues. Roger Wilkerson, Al Jazeera.
Well, workers in Wisconsin were among the first to organize themselves in unions in the United States. The first few were formed in the middle of the 19th century. Historically, most union members were industrial workers, but in 2009, the public sector unionists succeeded those in manufacturing for the first time. Overall, though, union membership is in decline. In 1983, 20% of U.S. workers were unionized. Last year, it was less than 12%. The pressure on unions in the United States isn't just happening in Wisconsin. Similar measures to rein in union-negotiated protections are pending in the state legislatures of Ohio, Iowa, Michigan, and Indiana. And 22 of the 50 states have so-called right-to-work laws that sharply curtail union membership and bargaining rights. Well, for more on the money problems and the protests, I'm joined from Madison, the state capital of Wisconsin, by John Nichols. He's a political writer for The Nation magazine. Mr. Nichols, thanks very much for joining us here on Al Jazeera.
It's a great pleasure to be with you.
So some Americans have described what's happening in Wisconsin as a micro version of events in Tunisia and Egypt. Do you think that there's some truth to that, no matter how little it may be, or is it a real sort of stretch of the imagination to try to make those types of comparisons?
Well, first off, it didn't look like a micro version today. By estimates of some of the police and security folks who were on the street, there were 100,000 people out in the downtown of Madison, Wisconsin today to protest against these what they see as assaults on trade union rights. And so we're starting to get numbers that are comparable to some of what we're seeing in the Middle East. Now, I do believe that there's simply no question that many of the people who are on the streets in Madison, Wisconsin, see themselves as reacting to a tyrannical or authoritarian move by a government in much the same way that people in the Middle East see themselves. And I cannot emphasize to you the number of folks who are on the streets in Madison. And by this you mean the state government, right? Yeah, the governor in Wisconsin. Now, whether you agree with that or not, the protesters are definitely, many of them see a connection to Egypt and Tunisia. In fact, I would say of the signs I saw today, at least maybe 20% of them made references to Egypt.
Well, let me ask you, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
So how do you see this being resolved? I mean, will workers just keep on protesting until some or all of their demands are met? And is the Republican governor in any mood to negotiate? Is he even listening?
He's clearly listening. He cannot help it. At this point, the crowds are so massive. The downtown of Madison is very tight. It's a very, very small area. And so just to have this many people there is the dominant reality of the city at this point. So the governor can't be missing it. By the same token, he is a genuine conservative. He really does believe in doing the things that he's doing. But these demonstrations have grown so large, and they keep growing. They've doubled in size each day throughout this past week, that it's no question becoming one of those moments where the governor may have to back down. But he won't do so easily. He's going to resist as much as he can. And so I bet, my sense is that we'll have 2 or 3 more days, maybe even more than that. The workers themselves say that they'll stay as long as need be. And again, they make many comparisons to Egypt. They keep bringing up that 18 days, 19 days, references to how long the Egyptian protesters were out.
Let me just move a little bit into the politics of this. In what ways do you think that both left and right have been capitalizing on what's going on in Wisconsin for ideological purposes? And who do you think's winning that battle?
That's a very, very good question. There's no doubt that both sides have capitalized on it. The right has been very, very critical of public employee unions for a long time. And so Walker has become something of a hero, this governor of Wisconsin, has become something of a hero nationally to very, very conservative folks. By the same token, my sense is that the size of the demonstrations in Wisconsin, which really are unprecedented in the United States for a state-based protest of this kind, has energized the left. Even President Obama has spoken up on this. Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House,
do you think it's going to backfire on President Obama? I mean, why would he want to get involved in a state's issue?
Well, there's a very simple reason. In the setup for this interview, your reporter was mentioning the fact that the public employee unions have been very, very big backers of the Democrats. President Obama's running for re-election next year, and he's going to need these unions. If he hadn't stood up for the unions, that would have been something that would have been a real problem for him. So it's not that surprising that he's spoken out for them.
All right, John Nichols, thanks very much for joining us and giving us your perspective.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And I'll be back with more news from the Americas a little later on in the news hour, including a windstorm in Washington. Heavy gusts take down one of the U.S. Capitol's most ornamental treasures.
Also ahead, the G20 reaches a last-minute deal aimed at helping avoid another global financial meltdown. Plus,
I'm Nick Spicer in Hamburg, where voters are poised to kick off what could be a difficult regional election season for Chancellor Angela Merkel.